Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show after the show. It is special time. Special time to have one show end, the other one begin, and only you have the access. Only you have the golden ticket that lets you get inside. Well, it is book club. It is session 4, officially the final session for Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host Charlie Robinson of Macroaggressions Podcast. What's going on, Charlie?
Well, it's been a great book, and I'm excited that we got through it, and I couldn't wait to talk about it, and here we are. So let's.
I finished it. Father's Day weekend. We did this on Thursday. I had picked it up. I got through most of the pages on Saturday. I finished the rest on Sunday, and then I read it again today because I couldn't wait. I said I want to see how this ends, and I'm so happy that we did this. How about I'll just defer to you. General thoughts, highlights. I'll go through some of my highlights, and then we'll just jump right into this thread that everybody's bubbling about.
Well, it cracked me up since we've been talking about baseball this whole time, and I've been kind of chiming in with my little stories of how I was the low guy on the totem pole working in baseball. There's a scene in this last part that we did where they're at the carnival, and they're telling him, go get this, go get the left-handed glass stretcher, and there's an old prank that gets played on people. They tried it on me when I was working as an intern in baseball. They've got all these little like sayings.
Well, like the ninth green at 9 in Happy Gilmore.
Well, they told me to go. Like the players would be like, "Hey man, could you go in the freezer and get the box of frozen ropes? Could you go get the left-handed bats? Could you get the box of curveballs? Could you get the key to the batter's box?" All these things that they would send like young kids out to go do, they would try on me, and they're going, go get the keys to the key to the batter's box. I go, do you mean the batting cages? Are we talking about that? Because this isn't gonna. And then it just sort of, it reminded me when this poor kid's running around looking for left-handed glass stretchers. I was like, yeah, that's like looking for left-handed bats.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I remember some Inside the Huddle audio from years ago with like Brett Favre and all of his nonsense, and he would go up to some officials. I remember he was mic'd up one day, and I remember Brett Favre asking some officials for the left-handed footballs. And it took them about a second to say, "You goofball, get out of here." But yeah, the carnival scene, the carnival scene, that was funny to see this little kid, little tiny Ray, being taken for the gullible guy that he is, and obviously it kind of speaks to his character still as an adult. You can tell that Richard is a little bit more of a hardened character, a little bit more disillusioned with the world, a little bit more rebellious, and Ray, he's maintained that childlike wonder in things, and that romance, and also the ability to be influenced into going on what some people would call foolhardy adventures, whether it be building this stadium in his backyard, in his cornfield, or to go and make multiple trips between carnival barkers that want him to find left-handed glass stretchers and things like that. So yeah, I think it's one of those good origin stories as far as the boy that would become a man.
Yeah, and it was interesting that Gypsy's actual name was Annie.
Charlie, this is something for me. I wrote myself a note in here about that when we learned that Gypsy's name is Annie, and there's just so much going on at this point that I started wondering, what are we about to be taken down some kind of another psychedelic magic trip? Is Richard and Ray the same person? Have they been almost like split, like doppelgangered? Like what? I didn't understand where this was going for a moment.
I was wondering the same thing. I felt like we were getting a look at like one version, the Ray and Annie that live in Iowa, and then like his twin brother went off on a different path, and he met an Annie and travels the country in a carnival, which isn't exactly the greatest life in the world. And so it was this fork in the road when they were 16, right? Or when his brother went one way and he went the other way, and then they meet up later, and they both have Annies, and they both have interesting lives. I don't know. I felt the same way. I was waiting for then I started thinking about the movie, and I started going, where is this in the movie? Like, how would this play into the movie? Like, but they'd have to just rewrite the entire ending, if it was this. So I don't know. I just kind of went with it, but I made a note that Annie, that same name, coming up twice.
Well, I say
seems
that
symbolic. I mean, it was there for a reason.
Yes, it was. I'm sorry, I didn't hear. You glitched on Zoom. I thought you had stopped speaking, so I talked over you. That's my fault.
No
I don't know at which point you want to actually discuss the movie, Charlie, because now that we're done with the book, obviously we're all going to watch this together on Sunday, or at least I'm going to put it out there. I'll let everybody know we'll watch it together on Sunday. There are things that I love the book, and if this was the thing this came out first, so this is the story. The movie is just the adaptation, and I think that some of the edits that they made for the movie as a visual presentation was very, very good. I think as a film, it's strong because it gets rid of a little bit of convoluted storylines that I think get convoluted for me. The twin brother is something that is not in the movie, but you don't miss it. You don't miss it at all. The other thing that we start getting here is, obviously Eddie Sissons is not in the movie.
Right.
That's just not even a character. Speaking of Eddie, poor Eddie. We learned that he was blackmailed into, giving the mortgage over to Mark and Bluestein because they pretty much knew that he was lying about him being, a Chicago Cub. And I love that. I love that how Ray had checked up on it. He went to the archives. He wanted to see if it was true or not, and he knew the whole time. But I think it's just a little bit more of a testament to Ray's character. He's just I don't know. I guess compassionate with an old guy who really, really wanted to live that dream and didn't attain it in the way that he wanted. What do you think about the overall arc of Eddie Sissons?
Yeah, I thought about that too. I mean, if Ray wanted to, kind of stop this madness, he could have done it years ago. But he knew that this guy wasn't being honest about this, but it didn't matter because it was important to Eddie, and he talked about, and he was living out his dream, and he I don't know. Ray never had the heart to pull the rug out from under him. He didn't need to. Didn't serve any purpose to do that, to bring him down, to do any of that stuff. But Bluestein did, and those guys, they didn't have a problem exploiting that whole in Eddie's story, and basically putting him in a situation where he had to give up the mortgage to them in exchange for them being quiet about his lie. It was going to devastate him. Then once it came out, they didn't really talk about it, and he just kind of sat in it for what seemed to be a while, and they didn't bother him or anything like that. It felt sad, but it also felt like listen, there's a million Eddie Sissons out there.
Yeah.
That just remember the old days of how they used to do it. And maybe the story isn't always 100% accurate, but I like that Ray knew and didn't out him.
I hated when Eddie was said you promised you wouldn't tell. You promised, and you can tell that it was just so embarrassing, and it almost took the I guess the air out of his own balloon. All those years that he kept himself inflated, thinking about those moments. Those moments he gave himself in his head, and this is at a time where, of course, we're reaching a fever pitch with how much is Ray going to be able to wrangle to keep the farm in his control? It gets to the point where the players, the ghost players, are willing to help. They're like, hey, listen, we used to till farms. I know how to farm. I know how to, use horses. We don't need tractors. Sell the tractor, and we can do things by hand. And they're, so it's incredible. It's incredible what's going on here. And then more things start happening. We start seeing more ghosts materialize on the field, but now in the opposing teams, they aren't just almost like generic NPC teams. Eddie goes nuts when he actually lays eyes on Three-Finger Mordecai Brown, who I know, Mordecai Brown, everybody should, this is a real person. He only had 3 fingers. He threw one hell of a curveball because of it, and he was one of those guys that came out of retirement during like World War II, when most of the players are off fighting, and to try to survive. I mean, you should look into. I know Charlie probably has, but some of the gimmicks that Major League Baseball and other Negro League Baseball, everything. The gimmicks that they had to go to be able to stay in business, because all of their big draws are gone. A lot of their consumer base is off fighting a war too. People like Mordecai Brown and other. What's the name of the one-armed player that came? That was a big World War II. Damn, there's a movie about him too. Shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he was very excited about that. But then, Charlie, Eddie gets a shot to play. This is where I started wondering what the hell's going on here. You and I joked off air when we ended last session. Watch Eddie go kill himself, because he'll think, hey, well, if I go kill myself, I'll be able to go play. But he's in the stands and he sees himself come out to pitch in relief. What the hell's going on with that?
It was wild. He was watching himself. He was watching himself pitch poorly.
He gets shelled. He gets shelled.
Totally. This was not, this was, you've got your big moment. Hey, I see myself as a younger person. I'm going to watch this whole thing. It was not good. Right. So he didn't pitch well. But he gets his, he gets his Cubs uniform. He gets his Cubs uniform. He gets his cleats. His new cleats at some point, and this whole Eddie theme that's running through this just disappears in the movie. So it's unusual. I mean, I just wouldn't know how to unravel this whole thing if I were looking at a book and trying to turn it into a movie. Like what goes, what stays, what. Boy, you got to get rid of the twin brother. You got to get rid of the oldest living Chicago Cub. Like, there's a lot of stuff you're cutting out of a book that isn't. It's not like we're reading encyclopedia. I mean, it's a relatively small book, but still, they had to turn that out for the movie, and it was. Boy, it was in. I didn't miss, but like you said, I didn't miss it. I didn't know what I was missing, but the movie seemed great. But now after reading the book, I'm like, well, there's this whole line. There was a little. It feels like in the movie they tried to, I don't know, maybe not focus so much on the ghosts, the component of it. There's a lot of ghosts in the book. I mean, there's guys out on the field,
but they're hanging out with them.
They were talking about like ghost farmers, farming this land and everything. I mean, you're thinking like, well, I guess it's kind of fiction, but. I don't know.
Yeah,
I would have been interested to talk to the guy that was the screenwriter for the movie, because how you make that decision, what to keep in and what to from the book and what to put into the movie.
Well, who is the screenwriter? Maybe we can find him. That'd be a lot easier than Kevin Costner. Maybe we can find the screenwriter.
Yeah.
I mean, because you make such a great point. That is a true talent in itself, to read a book like this and to say, okay, if we're going to bring this to the screen, we're going to have to do some radical things. And when you think about what has been done to this book to bring it to the screen, it is pretty radical. But if you've only known the movie, then you know almost a perfectly told story and nothing else. Yep. And so it's wonderful to know exactly how you can prune this bush and still have a cogent piece that you can, it's wonderful. Because anybody else looking at this book that was told, okay, make it into a movie, I think that 9.9 people out of 10 would find a way to keep Eddie in there, because they feel like they're just too integral to the story. It's how Ray got the farm. It's just too much, but he's gone. Mm-hmm. But here's another thing I wanted to talk, because we're talking about the ghosts now. There is so much more in this book compared to the movie, and I love how in the movie the buildup is the father. The buildup is Ray being able to talk to his father. In this, the father is everywhere. I mean, he's the catcher that comes up. He goes on a hitting tear. Joe Jackson loves him. I mean, Ray essentially spends an entire year or more, or whatever the hell it is, the amount of time here, watching his father play. And when it comes to, this is the only thing that, one of the things that confuses me. On page 231, one of the last things he's talking to Eddie about before Eddie dies is how, again, nervous he is to approach his father and have a conversation with him. And Eddie says, of course you can do it. You can talk. You're awfully good. And he said, that's Daddy. And if I look closely, I can see the square cut of his jaw and has recognized him on the way up. He said, how can I do this? How can I go and talk to him without giving away everything I know? Pretty much at that point in the book, I'm saying, what are you talking about? Why is it? He says, Eddie says, you're awfully good at keeping secrets. I should know. But what's the need for keeping a secret from your father? This is not a time travel movie. This is not Back to the Future. He's not going to disappear from a Polaroid or anything. He's already dead. So I never understood why it takes on that, like, you can't tell them about the future. They all know the future. They've already lived their life. So
there's a quote in here where he says, it would destroy anyone to know his own future.
That's the only thing that makes it feel that I said there's a little bit of is that a loophole? Is it an inconsistency? Or does somebody else have the ability to explain this to me? I just didn't understand why it took on a Back to the Future kind of a feeling right there, when we all understand that these people have already lived their lives. And they seem to as well, based on how they talk with each other about what lives beyond the center field doors. And I didn't understand that.
Yeah. You're right. They're already out of this world that they would theoretically have no ability to impact this current world, unless he's talking about, you don't want to screw up the heads of the ghosts, like get them thinking about all this. But again, you're right. It wasn't like you were going to really go back in time and actually find your father when he was 25 and say, nice to meet you. I'm your future son. We're your future twin sons. Great to meet you. We like the way you call a game. And then send him off into a insane asylum after that or something, so it was a little unusual. It was, it was a little, I think you're right. Like maybe a little bit of a loophole there, where if they were worried about disrupting the space-time continuum, it didn't really seem like that would have been a thing. You're talking to dead people.
Right.
So,
well, Charlie, listen to this. Scott Johnson, UCF, in the chat room says, maybe that's the superstitious side of the ball player in them. Don't talk to them at the moment, during the moment, because you'll mess it up. Maybe that's, yeah. I can live with that.
It's as good of an answer as any. They are all a bunch of baseball players, and we know baseball players are a bunch of weirdos. They're superstitious. They wouldn't want to mess something up, especially something as good as this. And Ray recognizes that throughout the entire book, that there's some moments where he's like almost afraid to do anything for fear that he's going to screw it up. Even Jerry feels the same way. He didn't even want to go into his own apartment and get his stuff. He just wanted to stay there. They're sort of understanding that what they were in was potentially fragile, and they didn't want to make any sudden movements or talk about the wrong thing or say something. You don't want to say something to your dad where he goes, what? And like all of a sudden you just want to play it safe. It seems like they wanted to sort of play it safe a little bit at sometimes, like, don't mess with anything.
Don't mess with anything. And then of course Eddie dies. Then he goes and he's found the next morning by Jerry, right? By Jerry. And then we have this exchange. Ray and Annie, they get in touch with all of Eddie's daughters. They arrange something. He says they'll take over all of the funerals and stuff like that. They are going to bury him in the cornfield. Then they go and they confer with the ghosts. And the ghosts want to help out, but if they bury him in the cornfield, they can't go beyond the outfield wall, or else they won't be able to be part of it. So what do? They decide, let's bury him right there in left field. And Joe Jackson makes the quip, I've played on worse. And I played on worse. And so you have this funeral, this funeral with Eddie Sissons and all the ghosts in attendance helping with the actual burial there. And then we start getting into the bigger resolutions. That is whether or not the farm, how is it going to survive? We have Richard. Annie says that he claims, or Gypsy Annie claims, that Richard heard a voice. He said he heard the voice, but he still can't see. And he's asking Ray on page 239. Ray, he says to me, looking wildly around him, Ray, teach me how to see. And then the next page, on page 240, is when we have the beginning of this confrontation that is really the apex of all of the action in the movie. And that is the big confrontation between Mark, Bluestein, and it all results in Karen falling and starting to choke on a big chunk of hot dog. And this calls the big purpose. What was Moonlight Graham's purpose? What was the exchange? Well, he got a lot more in this book than what he get. I really do believe this is another thing of Charlie that I love about the book, is that Moonlight Graham, there was so much more at stake for him in the movie, for him to cross the gravel of the field and go help Karen when she was in that need, when she was choking, because he only had one day in the sun as young Archie Graham. At least in the book, Moonlight Graham had what seemed to be an entire summer's worth of adventures in that field, and he was hitting 300. He was loved by his teammates. He was doing great, and he came out and he came to the rescue, transformed back into the old version of Moonlight Graham from Chisholm, Minnesota, and he saves Karen, fulfilling what I believe we all can agree on was going to be his true purpose, not only to fulfill his own dreams, but to be there to save Karen's life. Makes you think about how much fate is on a predetermined track. But what do you think about all that?
Yeah, it's a really heavy-duty question to ask, because if they hadn't gotten him, if they hadn't been part, then who would have saved Karen? They made a point of talking about the distance between where the how long it would take for the ambulance to get there and where the closest hospital and everything. They made it sound like it was far away, like somebody needed to do something immediate. And Ray mentions how he didn't really know CPR all that well. He wasn't really sure what was what. And so the idea that Doc Graham needed to be there in the moment and needed to make that decision was, the way they described it, as he kind of walks around the back side of the fence, the left field fence, and it's sort of, as he's going, sort of transforming from a ball player into this doctor, carrying the bag that he the bag with him that he allegedly, I guess they said he never had the bag, or someone else carried the bag for him, but this time he came around the corner and he had the bag, and he was ready to take care of a choking Karen. I could kind of see it in my head. I could see this transformation. And, he really he got the best of both worlds, though, if you think about it, because he got the ability to play, get that at bat and then some in the book, and play for a while, and still become the doctor in the end. And then he mentioned that he had to get home because he didn't want to be late for his wife, and so there's still this sort of level of confusion where you can't. How would he know that he was just a baseball player? It's
just Charlie, what I started thinking about at that point, it's like at page 248. Here, listen to this. He says, Ray Kinsella, I say, my daughter, I point to Karen, my wife, I point to Annie, and then for no reason I can fathom, I introduce everyone, even Abner Bluestein. Well now, it's lucky I happened to be on the scene, Ray Kinsella. That little girl wouldn't have lasted much longer. I look at him smiling from ear to ear, and I recall someone saying he was always the first at the side of an injured player. At that point, I said, Moonlight Graham has this Kris Kringle kind of a aura to him, because even when Ray encountered Graham in that really magical, misty evening in Minnesota in the street, and went to his office and offered him that ability. Are you that kind of man that can give me that chance, Ray Kinsella? We were talking about it a couple of sessions ago when we were doing book club, and we said he knows. There's something he knows, but almost like Ray and Jerry, where they're going throughout this entire adventure, not wanting to say too much, not wanting to screw up the magic. It's almost as if Moonlight Graham did not want to screw up the magic either. He knew that he was in the pocket for something, and he knew that Ray was fulfilling some kind of an inexplicable purpose. And I don't know, there's just something very sly about these characters, especially Moonlight Graham, and it's wonderful. And then, of course, you have on page 251, what is the foundation for the famous Field of Dreams speech, the baseball speech, Salinger's Dream, which turns out to be, in the movie, Terrence Mann's speech about why you can't sell the farm, that the people will come, Ray, and about the importance of baseball and the importance of America and the importance of people believing in the good times that were and can be again. The childlike, all that stuff. This Salinger's Dream is just gorgeous. And then when you watch the movie, it still hits you right in the throat. And that's just a wonderful way to end the whole chapter there. What do you think about the dream, about anything else that we just discussed?
Yeah, it's there's a quote I wrote down from this during it, and it said I forget exactly who said it. America has been erased like a blackboard, only to be rebuilt and then erased again. But baseball has marked time, while America has rolled by like a procession of steamrollers. And so, he's talking about how people will instinctively know to come here. They won't even really know why. And it makes sense for them to have that conversation because they all know what they're talking about. They just went on this. They just got done with a journey like that. They didn't know why they were doing what they were doing, going to Boston and going to Minnesota and then coming back down to Iowa. They sort of knew they were on an adventure and they had to get there, and they were going to just drive down I-80, I mean, like in their minds, these people are going to come to this field for the same reasons why they went on their adventures, because something will just instinctively tell them that they need to be here, and they'll wander around. I mean, and so he talks about this like as if, I mean, it's the worst business plan in the world, if we're being totally honest. I mean, you could never get a loan on this business plan, and yet he gives this speech, and after knowing and seeing all the magic that you've seen throughout the book, you just go, yeah, of course that will happen, because it's meant to, and so it's a fascinating sales pitch of why he needs to kind of continue on and
yeah,
make the decision to generate revenue a different way.
Well, listen to these two paragraphs, and this is why I think this book was such an amazing success in my eyes, because again, you can't even say that this is about baseball. They'll turn up your driveway, not knowing for sure why they're doing it, and arrive at your door, innocent as children, longing for the gentility of the past, for home canned preserves, ice cream made in a wooden freezer, gingham dresses. I don't know what the hell. What is that? Gingham dresses. Gingham. I don't know. And black and silver stoves with high warming ovens and cast iron reservoirs. Of course, we don't mind if you look around, you'll say. It's only $20 per person, and they'll pass over the money without even looking at it, for it is money they have and peace they lack. That's not even about baseball. I mean, that is just what we're always looking for. We're always looking to recreate that joy of childhood, and for some people that could be baseball, and that's just beautiful.
Yeah it is. I thought it was interesting also that they built a door in the outfield wall. I don't know, it felt for some reason, because they specifically mentioned it, it felt to me like it was symbolic, or there was some significance to there being a door, meaning you can kind of come and go, you can close it off, and because he went to great detail to explain how it just was really well done and looked like it was just part of the wall and just opened up. And I thought that was sort of, I don't know, maybe Jerry's way of trying to symbolically show some sort of separation between himself and this ghost cornfield of his. It was, I don't know, it was just something I wrote down. And then the cars start arriving, and it reminds me of this scene in Contact with Jodie Foster, and there's a scene where she's gone through the wormhole and she's sitting on the beach, and it's designed to sort of be like a fantastic voyage type thing, and she's having this explanation, and she's saying, are there more of us? And he said, we've reached out to a lot of different places to let them know about where we are. And she looks up, and she had thought that she was the only person that had read this message and gone through time, and she can see just all of these different ones coming in from all different directions and different angles, and she realizes that, oh my God, I thought I was the only one on this trip. There's so many more. And when you have this, when he starts describing how the cars start arriving, they just start arriving, I was thinking, like, in my mind, it kind of reminded me of that part from the movie Contact, because it just, you realize that how big the world is, or the universe is, and that there's just so much going on. Here we are thinking like, oh, this is our own little trip and it's the most important thing, and then you realize like there's plenty of other people figuring this out too. So I don't know, I connected with that as well in this.
I was starting wondering about that. I said, are these real attendees? Because in the movie, it ends with the procession of cars. You can see coming from miles that the magic was already manifesting, and that the farm was saved, and this was just people were being drawn like, moths to a flame. But in this, it almost seemed like the attendees themselves were not material.
Because they were kind of confused. He made it sound like they wouldn't know why they were there, and they would look around and ask, unusual questions. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I started thinking to myself, if they were not even really physical, cars and people coming out and paying the money, it doesn't mean that the money that they pass over to Ray isn't physical, because earlier on in the book, when he goes to abduct J.D. Salinger, he offers up a Joe Jackson home run ball that was hit in his backyard. So that was a physical relic from a ghost game. So I'm thinking to myself, well, hey, ghost money must be good as ghost baseballs. It's just, it has to be. And think about the memorabilia that you can produce for sale. Hey, this is a Joe Jackson home run ball from my backyard. There's no end to it.
They just needed eBay back then.
Yeah.
Shape.
Let me ask you this. When did Richard first see? Because then he and I was looking all over for it, and I couldn't. Maybe I overlooked it, but he and Ray, they go on their little starstruck walk, trying to say not too much to their father, and obviously Richard can see him now. But so, at what point did he actually see for the first time? I think I missed it, and I read it twice.
I don't know.
See,
that's the chat think.
Yeah, guys, in the chat room, did you pick up on when Richard saw for the first time? Because I read it twice, and I must have missed it twice, or it just is a detail, which I think is pretty important, that he left out. So I'll keep an eye on the chat room for that one, because we're almost done. Now it's just the last couple of pages, which is so aptly titled, The Rapture of J.D. Salinger. And this is where Salinger is invited to go beyond the corn with the players. He admits, finally, I thought that there was going to be some kind of a mysterious twist to all this stuff, but he was just holding out on Ray. He admits finally he did give that interview about wanting to play at the Polo Grounds. Finally, after all this time, he admits it. And he's invited by the players to go beyond the corn, and Ray is righteously indignant. This is where we get, I mean, in the movie, we get this point where, why not me? And even here, why not me? In the movie, he says, what's in it for me? And that is, of course, when we are led to, I think, one of the greatest resolutions in movie history. I do believe so. I'm not going to say anything more about it because I think people are going to enjoy this now. But we get a similar scene here. Why not me? Why are you going out there? And Annie kind of calms him down, and he realizes why he needs to be there with his family, what he's been given, what his purpose was, and that Salinger, this is what he has to do to fix things for himself and to go the extra distance and see what he's going to write about next, and what kind of loose ends he has to tie up. And it just ends in such a wonderfully mundane way. On the porch, we turn to look at the silent satiny green of the field. I press the switch, and like a candle going out, the scar of lights disappears. Above the farm, a moon bright as butter silvers the night as Annie holds the door open for me. That's it. And you have to imagine that the magic continues, but Salinger is on the other side with all of the players, and we don't know what happens there, and I guess we're not meant to until he publishes his next great work. So that's what I got from that. What do you have with the ending?
Yeah, it was, everybody had a little something they had to work out during this book. Salinger had to do that as well. It was funny, he just refused till the very end to admit that he had actually given that interview. And, and Ray probably was like, thanks a lot, man. I felt like I was going crazy this whole time. I kept thinking that this has to be it, right? And then you're telling me no. But again, he continued. He stuck with it. He didn't give up. And in the end, you find out, that Salinger was just, I gave the interview. I got to tell you. But everybody, listen, that's not Ray's relationship with that field. He's not maybe supposed to do that, to go into the cornfield like Salinger gets to, and he shouldn't. And I understand why he's frustrated by it, but I also know that, he just kind of needed to let Salinger have his trip, and that was part of his your deal, whether it's whether it's your psychedelic trip or mine, whatever, you have yours and you do your thing and I'll do mine. But his wife needed to kind of get a hold of, calm down, this is, remember, we're all working out our own things here. And for Salinger, man, he came a long way. He made a lot of progress during this trip, from being this just guy that's hidden away from the world to really coming out of his shell, starting to embrace his own recognizability during this journey, and getting himself ready along the way to finally be in a position where he could go in the cornfield on his own. You know, he wouldn't have been able to do that had he not gone through this unveiling on this process. So everybody needed it.
Yep.
Everybody needed it for different reasons, and they got different things out of it. And the way that this was written, that wove all these storylines together, it's just it was brilliant, man. You know, and of course it's not real life, you know, so you have to allow for the fictional component of some of this. You have to sort of detach from reality for a little bit. But if you're able to do that, this book is really great.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
it really is. And so different from the movie too, which is weird, because how can I love the book and the movie at the same time? And they're two different stories, but I do. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. I agree with you. And in the chat room, we just had a couple of really interesting contributions. One from Susan. A few other people lost they couldn't see where Richard started seeing. And Susan gave us a little bit of, I don't know what page this is on. She says, after the dad stops speaking to them, Ray says he's been having trouble with his eyes, but I think it's clearing up. That's when Richard says it's true. Well, I mean, but Susan, I don't know. I know what you're talking about. At that point, it's true, because they repeat to each other. It's true, right? But that was already, they're already talking to him. So at that point, I'm thinking to myself, Richard already sees, and I was wondering at that point, well, how did he start seeing? Here it is. The game tonight was a doubleheader. That's when Richard and I walk out. Okay, the game tonight. Oh, hold on, wait. I'm smiling convulsively. This is on page 254. Whoever controls the strings must be chuckling, treating me like the heroine in The Perils of Pauline. By midnight, if the cars keep arriving, I'll have more than enough money to bring my mortgage up to date, and I'll go and see what those cars want, says Gypsy. What cars? Says Richard. So 254, on page 254, Richard is still implying that he can't see the cars, and the cars are not of material. They are not material people. Okay, that's where I'm starting to say, okay, they're ghost cars, but it's still they're going to have real money, because we know that the balls that the ghosts are playing with are real. So there's some kind of a transference there. But the next thing there is, the game tonight has been a doubleheader, and when it's finally over, Richard and I walk out onto the field. My fists are clenched, my tongue a piece of rock chipping against my teeth. As we make our way toward the plate, I feel like a school child commanded to the audience with the principal, who until now has been only a rumor. Rich and I stand close together, side by side, like the figures representing the Gemini astrological sign. The catcher has been talking to Chick Gandil. He looks at us and smiles. I can feel my heart shatter. I do not die. Richard's hand grimly holds my bicep, his knuckles white. So I guess that's it.
You can see him at that. He can see the player, but he can't see. Maybe he could just see his dad. I don't know.
At that point, it's on for Richard. I mean, because if he's not seeing anything, he's not going to be clutching his brother's arm. So at that point, he sees him. So I guess that's just it. The lights went on for him. I guess that's just what we have to accept. I guess.
Or maybe he just trusted that his brother was taking him. No, he'd have to have seen something for his hands to be white. Yeah. I guess that was the moment.
Into the thread we go. Jalen Wennings says, I think this is a rare case where the movie is better than the book. That being said, the book is still 5 stars and worth reading again and again, in my opinion. Just a testament on how good the film is. Not everything.
I agree with that.
I'm with him too. I have had a wonderful experience reading this book, and it has gotten me. In a way, I'm glad we read it. It has just been really wonderful in its it's very intricately written.
It is.
I love
to have all these storylines, not just storylines, but timelines, like different time like by decades. To have them all going at the same time is really tricky.
I know.
And to do it well, most people can't. I would never attempt something. I mean, I've written a couple books. I would never attempt something like this. This is high level stuff. This is the stuff you do when you are at the top of your game. This is
this is a pinnacle.
That is wild.
This is definitely a pinnacle. This is his Catcher in the Rye. And you know, when I'm reading this, and I knew that we were going to be coming here 4 Thursdays in a row and doing this book, it only got me more and more excited that the movie was going to be at the end of it, because I can't wait to see. This entire time, I've had to alter the way I saw Jerry Salinger in my head. I've had to think up people like Bluestein. I've had to think up people like Gypsy, and I had to think up people like Eddie Sissons. But other than that, I can't wait to see these characters in the flesh again, and I believe we get that in such a true interpretation in the movie. So I understand what Jalen's saying. He says, not everything would have translated to the screen. This was the most enjoyable experience in my favorite book club to date. Gal 221 says, I found this last section to be full of raw emotion for many of the main characters, from Ray to Eddie to Richard, while J.D. Salinger was the calm one during the explosions of emotion happening as things were coming to an end. Ray's vision shrank a bit, or rather came into balanced perspective when he faced possibly losing his child. Not that he was unbalanced about his singular focus of keeping the field maybe skewered priorities. Eddie was the baseball evangelist. His tent revival speech for baseball and leading in worship of it, his last hurrah, probably spoke to the deep love these characters had in common for the game. Salinger's tribute to baseball's timelessness in American culture was such in contrast to the politicization, I hate that word, that is today making its way into even baseball now. He says, I don't have to tell you that the one constant throughout the years has been baseball. America has been erased like a blackboard, only to be rebuilt and erased again, but baseball has marked the time. On page 218, I think Ray put into words the pain that is being healed. Quote, when most people reach for that heart's desire, it appears not as a horse, but as a tiger, and they are rewarded with snarls, frustration, and disillusionment, end quote. Wow, yeah, I remember that line. This book has surprised me, being much deeper a read than what might be expected from a book focused on a sport. Turns out that was not the whole focus. Made for a good read. Frank and Charlie, thank you for taking the discussion much more than I could have gotten out of the book on my own. Thank you for your hard work. It's also been fun and challenging to hear how others have thought about and reacted to the book. Wonderful. Our pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. This has been a lot of fun for me too. I mean, it's you know, for those people that started off, I remember on the first week that we did this, we had some of the viewers that were unfamiliar with baseball and didn't think they were going to like a baseball book because they were unfamiliar with the sport. And I could certainly relate. If I were reading a book about cricket, I would be like, I don't know anything about cricket. I'm probably not going to like it. But as you got into it a little bit more, it turned, and you started to realize it's there. Obviously, there's a story about baseball in it, but it was more about the human beings that were getting into these adventures and exploring what was missing in their lives, and having these really profound moments, and baseball had nothing to do with that. And so the book is almost limited by being thought of as a baseball book, because it's so much more than that. And I think that the people that, in this group that went through the 4 weeks and read the whole thing, I hope you got more out of it than batting averages and on base percentages and things like that. I mean, because this was a story about so many things, but part of it is following your dreams and trusting in yourself and putting yourself, just getting out there and doing it. It's really inspirational. And if you do these things, and if you trust in the universe, magical things happen along the way a lot of times to make your journey continue. So it's really inspiring. You mentioned it's his Catcher in the Rye. Yeah, it is. It felt like it was his Catcher in the Rye. While I was reading it, I felt like there was a particular reason why he picked J.D. Salinger. I mean, he could have picked anybody. Well, he would have had his choice of a few authors of the day, but he picked that one because I think maybe there was, maybe that book had a impact on his life.
Yeah. That definitely came through. I mean, there has to be a reason why. You learn something about the author in any of their books, especially when it's fiction, because you know that they're going to pull from people in their lives, even themselves. And he writes so personally about what it is to be a writer that he's speaking for himself and projecting for what has to be one of the, not just one of his own influences, but an American influence in literature. But Sharon says, this particular paragraph really stood out to me. Talking about, let's see here. I don't have to tell you, the one constant throughout the years has been baseball. That one right there continually reminds us of once was like an Indian head penny and a handful of new coins. That's a wonderful line. This particular paragraph really stood out to me. These pages were full of near tragedy. Thank goodness Moonlight Graham was there. Dreams were nearly dashed or achieved. What a roller coaster ride it's been. I enjoyed J.D. Salinger telling Ray that the cars and the people would come and turn up in his driveway for reasons that not even they would understand. The people would be drawn like ants to sugar, to come and sit at peace with their memories of baseball. These pages were magical. Ray has his field of dreams where everyone can relive theirs. Wasn't too sure how I felt about the ending in the book when Jerry walked onto the field. I can't say I remember how the movie ends, but I didn't expect Jerry to leave. I loved when Jerry told Ray that the article he read and saved all those years ago was true. So happy he was ready to share with Ray his love of the game. The book for me is a keeper, one that I will read again and again. Thank you, Frank and Charlie, for your insight into the game. I'm not really a sports fan, so I've been to a few games in the 70s. Funny how that I think about it when there were White Sox games. When I think about it, they were White Sox games. Anyway, look forward to watching the movie. Let me also just say, because I can't wait to watch the movie too, but if this has in any way, shape, or form piqued your interest in the game of baseball from an American history standpoint, if you love this country and you love its history and you thirst for more, even though he has turned out to be a completely brain-dead fucking fool, Ken Burns... Charlie knows.
I knew exactly where you were going, and the minute you said he turned out to be brain dead. But yes,
if you give yourself, I would say the first 7 episodes, at least the first 6 episodes of Ken Burns Baseball. It's a documentary that he produced for PBS in like the early 1990s. I think the episode 6 or 7 takes you up to and through, I think it's called The Capital of Baseball. It was an entire episode that talked about baseball in New York in the 1950s before the Giants and the Dodgers went west, where you have, there's just so much going on there and how it was just ingrained in the American spirit. You could go and check that out. The Negro Leagues, it's so fairly done, well done, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's just a human story. It's American history. I would say at least the first 7 episodes, and you're going to have a wonderful ride from throughout the Civil War into what would be called modernity. So, Charlie, anything else you got on that?
Agreed. It's a great. I watched. And they go into Shoeless Joe in it as well. They talk about that scandal, and they talk about Comiskey, the owner, and they talk about what a scumbag he was, and they talk about how he wouldn't, allow the players. He'd charge them to wash their uniforms and things like that. And so, like, you get some of the backstory as to what happened with Shoeless Joe. And
you're gonna know.
And I watched multiple episodes, but I didn't get into the modern part or any. I didn't. I think I got like as far as like the 1950s Yankees, so I still have more to go on that series, but it was great. I watched it while I was sick, so I just was like kind of in front of the TV for like hours just watching episode after episode, and I can agree with it. It's really well done. And Ken Burns, even though, I mean, let's be honest, who are you fooling with that wig?
I know it's all I would say the 8. I'm looking at all I'm looking at all of the episodes right here. Oh, my lava lamp's just timed out. First inning, our game. That I mean, we're talking about the Elysian Fields and the Knickerbockers. It was started in New York and Long Island, and then you have second inning, Something Like a War. Third inning, The Faith of 50 Million People. That's the Black Sox scandal right there. That's the third episode, is the Black Sox scandal, and it's also the coming out of the dead ball era and the emergence of cultural titan figures like Babe Ruth, who revived baseball for America. I mean, this is when the spirit of a country could be broken by what they learned about the White Sox. Because you want to talk about morality in this country. It was unthinkable for the average American to think that baseball could be rigged, that people on the inside would be of such low moral character to take a bribe and to throw a game, that it was so dishonorable. So, so this really broke the nation in many ways. And Babe Ruth, that 1920s, the Roaring 20s that came in at that point, that was a major cultural revival there, and he brought a lot of stuff back. You'll learn about Kennesaw Mountain Landis, the first commissioner that Ray Kinsella's father hated so much for punishing the White Sox in the way that he did. But you got to watch the first 8. I think, because that's it. I think the 7. Capital of baseball, that's 1950 to 1960 in New York. So I would say just go from the first 8. And that's a fun time. All right. Let's see. KTJO, we're getting there. Just stopping to say thank you, Frank, for introducing me to this book. I never would have picked it up if it wasn't for the book club. I'm very behind, only 30% of the way through the audiobook, but I've enjoyed it very much. My dad was a huge White Sox fan. I grew up going to Sox games. Frank Thomas, Robin Ventura, they were the stars during my teen years. I have memories flooding back to games on radio in the garage while Dad was washing the station wagon or pulling weeds. Falling asleep to games on the TV during summer afternoons, hot dogs and pop at Kaminsky Park. I grew up in rural Illinois by the Iowa border, a little over an hour from Iowa City, so the Iowa farm references are nostalgic. The wife Annie is my favorite character. I love her wit. That's a wonderful reminiscing right there. Jackie says, after Eddie passes away, it says that Ray had the feeling that if he drove to Iowa City and picked up the copy of Baseball Encyclopedia, he would find the entry of Eddie's stats from his 3 seasons as a relief pitcher for the Cubs. I stared at the image of the stats on the page. I couldn't help but think that this is exactly why Eddie would have wanted written for his obituary. Not read from some minister of the church Eddie had never attended or whatever. Yeah. It was also interesting, again, to see could the spirit of Eddie of the past being out on that ball field really translate into physical records being there to verify his existence. Another magical link between the spirit world manifesting in our world.
For sure. It would have made all of his lies truths.
Yes.
And he wouldn't have died in shame.
Just incredible. Just incredible. And again, like you said before, Charlie, you just got to suspend that. You have to give yourself over to a mystical, magical story in the sun, and that's what this is. NJSF, the last one here, says, in this last installment, there are some beautiful moments and also some hard moments to follow, especially as baseball terminology got a lot more used while describing the game. The ending also felt a bit rushed. There's no conclusive notion that Mark and Bluestein stopped harassing, and it seemed that the space between Jerry's mentioning of the solution and it coming to fruition was very sudden and left a lot of questions. Seemed like Deus Ex Machina at play. Yeah, despite these, I thoroughly enjoyed the read, and it was particularly enjoyable closure, Salinger's confession that he did give the interview. And he goes on to give the confrontation of Mark and Bluestein with Ray. There's other things that NJSF put in there, but that's for you guys and gals so you can read and interact with it. And for everybody that reads this book along with us in the future, as this entire serial will be left up on the SoundCloud and for YouTube for as long as it survives, and I have it on hard disk, so I'll be able to mirror this forever. People will be reading this book along with us for years, Charlie. The conference,
cool.
I love it. The conference,
I hope they get as much out of it as we did, because I couldn't wait to be allowed to read the next bit.
Yeah. It'll be great to always go back to. The confrontation of Mark and Bluestein with Ray, resulting in the fall and the shocking of Karen, was a roller coaster of drama and emotion. It brings us the hope that desire for well-being of a child is where lost humanity rediscovered. Of a child is where lost humanity rediscovered as Bluestein lowers the axe and offers his jacket to Ray. Doc Graham coming back to save Karen was a wonderful turn of events, so true to his character. As I believe it's predetermined. I think that Ray was on a mission, and that Doc Graham was not only going to be fulfilled, but he was going to be there to fulfill a service for Ray in a time of great need. And for those of you who are going to be watching with us this Sunday, when should we start? I want to do this at I think I might start the episode. I think I might start the movie at 10 p.m. Eastern time. Because aren't you in Mountain Time, Charlie?
Well, I'm going to be in Las Vegas, so I'll see if I want to try and make it.
Well, either way, I wanted to start it a little bit later on the East Coast, so people throughout the, whatever time zone they're in, it's not too early. So if I start at 10, it'll be 7 on the Pacific. But if you can't watch it, obviously, we'll get back together and we'll talk about things. Yeah, that'll be fun. Anything else you got to say, man? You just take it away for the conclusion.
Well, I want to thank you for trusting me with this part, because you've been doing this a long time, and you've built this really tight relationship with your audience, and they trust you. They should. And I'm not just on your show. I watch your show too. You know what I mean? I've been enjoying your work for a long time, and I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to be part of your book club with your really special audience that you've been curating over the years, putting together. And I think that's not lost on me. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, you were the perfect pick. We've become good friends over the last few years, and obviously this really solidifies it. I mean, I really love doing this with you, and I knew that people would really jive with you, and they already do. I mean, you've been on the show, mate.
Oh, good.
Oh, yes.
Well, I obviously I like your audience because I'm in your audience.
That's it. Oh, that's it.
We have good taste.
We are of each other. That's the thing.
We understand. I think you and I both understand that there's some very serious things happening out there in this world. But if you can't also laugh about it and it not have it be viewed as being disrespectful, just kind of laughing at the absurdity of it all, you'll probably do much better with it. You'll probably get through it without breaking your brain. And so we come at these problems, I think, from a serious standpoint where we want to get the facts right and we want to talk to our audience about this stuff, but at the same time we're like, God damn, did you see what is happening here? Like, this is insanity. So we have fun with it, but but it's been not, I'll tell you, it's been a nice break to just kind of read about baseball and not blackmail.
How, yeah, baseball, not blackmail, even though blackmail was a little part of baseball in this.
Well, there was a little bit in there, too, actually, now that I think about it.
We couldn't separate it completely, but there was there's a little bit of everything there. And, maybe I'll start it at, I know it's not going to help many of you out there, but my, Sunday night programming on QuiteFrankly.tv never starts earlier than 9 o'clock. So maybe I can start the episode. I can start the movie at 9:30. I can maybe shave a half hour off. It's only 90 minutes. It's a well-told story. There is no downtime in between. So maybe I can start it at 9:30 instead of 10, and we'll figure it out from there. Anyway, I'll make everybody know what's going on. I'll send out all the emails, and I'll send out all the notifications, and we'll have a good time with that. Charlie Robinson, thank you so much for everything, my friend. It's been an honor.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun to get our minds off of the serious stuff and focus on a book that, now that I think about it, it's a pretty serious book too. With a really great message, something for everybody. So,
well, what about this?
Encourage people to read it.
Next Thursday, how about next Thursday we do a bonus, maybe just a half hour?
If you catch it, I'm gonna have to do it later. I got a date with James Corbett.
Oh shit! Oh, never mind. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Maybe we just do it at a different time on a different day, because we already finished reading the book. But I think it would be nice to get a little bit of response from people. And for those of you out there like Jerry in the chat room who's in Scotland, if I started at 9:30 or whatever the hell, I mean, that's still like 2 o'clock in the morning for him. Jerry, feel free to rent the movie, or get it on get a torrent, or I don't know what the hell you want to do. Rent the movie, whatever is good for you guys. Let's all just let's sit back and watch it at some point on Sunday. I will have a communal viewing around 9:30 p.m. Eastern time, and when we get back together again, we'll figure that out. We can all talk for even 20 minutes about what our biggest takeaways were. All right? So, good night. Have a wonderful one, and I'll see you in August for the next book club with Lindsay Sharman. Hey, I hope that you read along with us, Charlie.
I wrote it down. The city in
Devil in the White City. It's all good.
Devil in the White City. That's right.
Yeah.
I went to the website and looked it up and read up about it. Cool. So yeah, I want to do it. I'm going to read along.
All right.
I'm going to get it.
Well, I'll talk to you soon, buddy. And thank you guys, everybody at home. Have a good night.